Moses, a path through the raging sea. Commanding.
And we inspired to Moses,
Urgent.
travel by night with my servants.
Ominous.
Indeed, you will be pursued.
The Quran, chapter Ash-Shu'ara, 26:52. Thoughtful. Have you ever been so trapped that your only escape was a miracle? Questioning. What do you do when turning back means slavery and moving forward means walking into a watery grave? Dramatic. This is the story of a prophet, a people, and a moment when the very laws of nature were torn apart by a faith that refused to break. Ominous. It begins in the dead of night, thick with the silence of fear. Somber. For 400 years, the children of Israel had been caught in the jaws of Egypt, their spirits crushed, their backs bent to the whip. Whisper. But tonight, a whispered promise was finally in motion. Tense. Under a sliver of moon, a nation of slaves was attempting to steal itself away. Solemn. In the humble dwellings of Goshen, families gathered their meager belongings, their every movement a prayer against discovery. Tense. The air, usually humid with the scent of the Nile, was sharp and cold with dread. Fearful. Every rustle of the wind, every cry of a distant animal sent a fresh wave of panic through their hearts. Reverent. They were following their prophet, Moses, a man who had spoken to God, a man who had humbled the most powerful king on earth with a series of devastating plagues. Urgent. Now he was asking them to do the impossible. Walk out of the furnace and into the unknown darkness of the wilderness. Dramatic. Across the land, in the gilded halls of power, the atmosphere was just as charged, but with a different energy. Bitter. The bitter poison of wounded pride. Somber. Pharaoh, the man who called himself a god, had been defeated. His kingdom was in chaos. His firstborn son was dead, and his authority lay in ruins. Resigned. In a moment of grief-fueled weakness, he had let them go. Ominous. But a tyrant's promise is written on water. Angry. As the dawn approached, his sorrow curdled into a furious resolve. Determined. He would not be remembered as the king who was defeated by a shepherd.
He would not allow the history of his reign to be a story of humiliation. The scribes would record his power, his fury, his ultimate victory. The order was given. The war chariots, the pride of the Egyptian military, were to be assembled. The army was to be mustered. As the last Israelite family slipped into the desert, a storm of vengeance began to gather behind them. They had taken their first steps toward freedom, but the thunder of hooves was already beginning to shake the earth. The jaws of the trap. For 2 days, a miraculous pillar of cloud guided the fleeing Israelites, shielding them from the scorching sun. By night, it became a pillar of fire, a celestial lighthouse in the vast, empty desert. It was a constant, visible sign of God's protection, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness of their fear. But where did it lead them? To the edge of the world, it seemed. On the third day, they found themselves cornered, their path blocked by the churning, impassable expanse of the Red Sea. And just as this horrifying realization dawned, a new horror appeared on the horizon. A cloud of dust, growing larger by the second, glinting with the evil sparkle of thousands of spear tips and bronze helmets. Pharaoh was coming. It was the perfect trap. The fragile faith of the people shattered. The memory of God's plagues vanished, consumed by the immediate terror of the hunt. They turned on Moses, a tidal wave of panic and despair.
And when the two companies saw one another, the companions of Moses said, panicked, "Indeed, we are to be overtaken." The Quran, chapter Ash-Shu'ara, 26:61. Angry. "Did you bring us here to die?" they shrieked, their voices laced with the bitterness of generations of suffering. Bitterly, "Were there not enough graves in Egypt?" Despairing, "It would have been better to stay as slaves than to be slaughtered in this desolate land." The weight on Moses must have been immense, leading a people on the verge of mutiny, seeing the terror in their eyes, feeling their despair, all while the deadliest army on earth bore down on them.
His heroism was not an absence of this pressure. It was his ability to stand firm beneath it, his own heart fortified by a certainty his people could not yet grasp. The tension became a physical entity. The ground vibrated with the pounding of hooves. The roar of the sea was now joined by the war cries of the Egyptian army. For the children of Israel, it was over. The journey had ended in a massacre on the beach. This very moment of ultimate despair and miraculous salvation is so sacred that it is honored to this day. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to Medina, he found the Jewish community fasting. He asked them why, and they told him it was the day of Ashura, the day God saved Moses and drowned Pharaoh. The prophet replied, firmly, "We have more right to Moses than you." He then fasted on that day and instructed his followers to do the same. Sahih Muslim, 1130. He connected his nascent community across the centuries to this single, pivotal moment of deliverance. But for the terrified souls huddled at the water's edge, that deliverance was unimaginable. The jaws of the trap were closing. All they could see was the raging sea, the furious army, and the prophet who had led them there, holding nothing but a piece of wood. A path through the impossible. In the face of utter chaos, Moses became an island of unshakable calm. His people were collapsing in terror, but his eyes were fixed on God. He shouted above the rising panic, his voice a clarion call of defiance against despair. Resolute, "No, indeed, my Lord is with me. He will guide me." Then the divine command came. A command that would suspend reality. A command not for the army, not for the people, but for the sea itself. Then we inspired to Moses, "Strike with your staff the sea," and it parted, and each portion was like a great towering mountain. The Quran, chapter Ash-Shu'ara, 26:63. Moses raised his staff and brought it down upon the water. A deafening roar ripped through the air as a great wind howled from the heart of the sea. The waters began to churn violently, not in waves, but as if being pulled apart from their very depths. The Red Sea split open. The seabed, dry and sandy, appeared like a road where none had existed. On either side of this impossible path, the water rose into two colossal, shimmering cliffs, walls of a liquid canyon where fish swam in suspended disbelief. The Israelites stared, their screams choked in their throats. Fear turned to stunned, terrified awe. Urged on by Moses, they scrambled into the path, walking on the floor of the sea, the salty wind whipping their faces as they gazed up at the towering walls of water on either side. Pharaoh's army arrived at the shoreline, their horses rearing back at the unnatural sight. But the tyrant's arrogance was greater than his astonishment. He saw not a miracle of God, but a strategic advantage. "Charge!" And the chariots thundered into the divine corridor, their soldiers convinced that their prey was finally within their grasp. It was a fatal miscalculation. They were charging into their own grave.
As the last Israelites stepped safely onto the far shore, the miracle reached its terrifying conclusion. The wind died. The invisible force holding back a sea vanished. With a cataclysmic roar that shook the heavens, the two walls of water collapsed inward. The sea returned. The pride of Egypt, its invincible army, its golden chariots, its divine king, was consumed in a churning vortex of water and sand. The Quran tells us that in his final gurgling moments, Pharaoh cried out that he believed in the God of Moses. But a faith born of terror is not faith. It is a plea born of desperation, and it was too late. Their final sin was to witness the undeniable power of God and still believe their own was greater. Then, a profound silence fell, broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves on the shore. To solidify their faith and to serve as a sign for all of humanity to come, God performed one last chilling act. So today we will save you in body, that you may be to those who succeed you a sign. And indeed, many among the people are of our signs heedless. The Quran, chapter Yunus, 10:92.
The sea coughed up the lifeless body of Pharaoh, casting it onto the beach for all to see. The tyrant was mortal. The oppressor was gone. They were truly and finally free. The God who parted the Red Sea is the same God we turn to today. The question is not about his power, but about the depth of our faith when we find ourselves standing at the edge of our own impossible sea.